Thank you, Daniela. It is time for the headliner brought to you by Miller Lite. Let's bring in the Senior Executive Vice President of Social Impact, Growth Initiatives, and Legislative Affairs for the NHL, and that is Kim Davis. Kim, thanks for joining us today. Really, really appreciate you giving some time, which I know has been a very, very busy, it's probably always busy when you're working for the NHL, but I assume, especially what's been transpiring lately, we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Happy to be here, Art. Thank you.
Uh, I really want to start with you explaining what your job entails.
So my job, a long title, mouthful, really incorporates five major areas. One is building relationships in communities, really, really important alongside our clubs across North America, growing our sport, particularly with new audiences, the culture of our sport, and how that culture is received both by existing as well as potentially new fans. I have responsibility also for youth hockey programming that comes out of our industry growth fund, which is a partnership with NHLPA and the league. And then finally, our relationships and our partnerships legislatively, both on Capitol Hill and in Ottawa.
Well, the reason I wanted you to explain that is because your first experience with hockey was not a good one. Your son was at an all-male private school in Connecticut. He decided to try the game. He was called the N-word. You pulled him out of the sport. I am wondering, when the NHL approaches you to take this position, do you know? I mean, did that have any impact? What happened to him and how this game treated you in the beginning? Because a lot of people, including myself, would have walked away from this game and never looked back.
No, I can't say that it had an impact per se. What I would say is that it informed my understanding that there were some real issues, particularly at the youth level, and that not just children, but parents needed to be educated, and that really has become a major focus of my work.
I've seen a variety of interviews and read so much about you in the last several days here that there are 3 points that you said that we need to make sure happen in order for hockey to be inclusive. The hockey is everyone. They're listening, white men of power being advocates, and also time and resources to build up communities to advance anti-racist work. Can you elaborate on these points and why they are so important? And if we're going to not only come together but advance as a society and as a culture.
In my op-ed and in the league statement, it was the first time they had seen the words black and racism used together. And that was shocking to me because anti-racist work requires all of us to be allies, and we are a white sport. It's a fact. We shouldn't hide or run from that. You know, honoring traditions doesn't mean you have to be a traditionalist. And so when I talk about white men in positions of power, that is the makeup of our sport. And so we have to ensure that just like we become competent in any other area of our business, that we are listeners and learners to become competent in what anti-racist work calls upon us to do. And so that's the first step in this journey. And it's a disciplined approach, I think, in that in order to really move forward, you have to start with being a good listener and a good learner.
When you talk about time and resources to build up communities to advance anti-racist work, I know it's a league initiative, but is this something that you really have to stress to each individual team? Because whether you're here in Detroit, your hometown of Chicago, or Raleigh, North Carolina, I mean, this is something that needs to be embraced by the entire league. This has to be a collective of the entire league.
Yeah, there's no question. The power of our league is the power of 31, soon to be 32. And so none of it matters if we don't localize this. And I'm excited that over the 2.5 years that I've been with the league, I've visited and had really deep engagement at the local level with over 27 clubs. And so those relationships exist, and my ability to provide them with insights, with data, with with counsel to help them execute this work at the local level is really what our partnership is about between the league and the clubs. Yeah, it's critical.
Before COVID 19, I saw you in Detroit. There was a great press conference. Chris Illich, Gary Bettman had provided a video. NHLPA was on board for the Learn, Play, and Score program, which is picking up an initiative, a $1 million commitment to cultivate hockey in youth. And obviously, when you can have a program like Learn, Play, Score, which not only teaches kids hockey, but also life lessons and skill lessons, it really has to be something that I would imagine that you just would like to see embraced by the entire NHL.
Yeah, Learn, Play, Score is a marvelous example of a model, and I talked about models and frameworks. It's a wonderful example of a model that we were lucky enough for over a year before it was launched to partner with the Red Wings in putting together. And it really has a couple of components. One is a shift in mindset to understand that engaging with currently underrepresented communities is about growth and not just about charity. And while charitable efforts are important and we continue to do that, the mindset shift to growth allows us to reimagine how our game is going to grow and how we're going to make money. And that at the end of the day, we're a business, and that's important. And so Learn, Play, Score looks at all of the various levers that need to be pulled in order to engage a community and engage underrepresented groups, from technology and how strengthening technology in a community creates the kind of pipeline of talent, human resource talent that we ultimately need, in addition to playing and understanding the game, which may result in the next NHL player being identified. So it's a holistic approach, and it's a model, I think, for so many markets to think about.
Kim, I know we're jumping around a little bit. We only have you for a limited time, but several players have issued statements about George Floyd's death. Dylan Larkin of the Red Wings did. There were a couple that I really uh, took to was Jonathan Toews and Patrice Bergeron. And it's weird when I've heard you talk and I've read things. You say it's really important for players to come together at this time. It's very important for white players to be on board when it comes to finding solutions to racism in hockey. I realize it'll take time. I think white people have a tendency to have it go in one ear and then right out the other. This seems to be different this time. I hope it's different this time. I pray that it's different this time. Do you get the same feeling when you see Toews, the captain of the Blackhawks, Patrice Bergeron, one of the best players in the league, where they come out and say, hey, you know what? I've turned, quote unquote, a blind eye to this, but no longer. Does that give you hope? Are we at the crossroads finally?
Yeah, it gives me hope, and it also gives me anxiety to the point you made about hoping that this is not just a moment, but this becomes a movement. And I think there are a lot of signs that suggest that it will be. One is the fact that so many of our players have stepped up on this social justice issue when it's not within the culture of our sport to do so. And they are amplifying what so many of the Black players have been talking about for so many years. And I think that we now have an opportunity to pivot and to accelerate. And I think that's what we're going to do.
I certainly hope we do. Speaking of black players, several have issued statements. I know Evander Kane, who has never been afraid to talk about virtually any topic. I love him as a player. He formed along with several players, including the Red Wings' Trevor Daley, who I've talked to many times about this subject. The Hockey Diversity Alliance, and it's going to interact with the NHL. How will you interact with them? I know they're separate from the league, yet their voices are going to be very, very important as we try to move forward here. Can you tell us what kind of relationship do you hope to have with the Hockey Diversity Alliance?
Sure. And in fact, I was on a 2-hour call with the Alliance on Monday night. So we are staying very connected as we are building out all of the structures to move this stuff forward. We have just announced and will be more publicly announcing a structure of committees within the NHL. One of those committees is a player inclusion committee that will be focused broadly on all of the dimensions and the intersections of need, whether we talk about race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation. I see the alliance, and we've talked about it this way, as almost a special forces unit that will drill down within that player community on specific issues of racism uh, for players of color, and will feed those recommendations and ideas into the structure that we're putting in place that will ultimately go to the Board of Governors. So I see I see them as being an integral and critical part of our dialogue and our learning. And other subcommittees like the Alliance for other intersections may prop up, may spring up as we move through this work.
Have you seen positive, not only reaction, but real change as this league, the National Hockey League, continues and tries to move forward?
Well, I've seen signs that suggest that I should be cautiously optimistic, and I mean that in a very real way, in a very authentic way. Um, I think, given the makeup of our sport, we're always going to be criticized for not doing enough. But to me, progress is measured by movement, not by destination. So the concept of hockey is for everyone is aspirational. Nobody's suggesting that we're where we need to be. We know we have a lot of work to do. I see owners, I see presidents, I see general managers stepping up, calling me, my having conversations with them, willingness to sit down and have the hard conversations. We're forming the Executive Inclusion Council, which is going to be made up of presidents, owners, and general managers. As you know more than many, that those are critical uh, audiences to both be educated, but also to have as allies, because they can make things happen in a much more accelerated way in our sport.
Can you kind of stress how important it is for white people to talk to white people? Because again, as I said, a lot of white people in one ear, out the other. This seems to be a moment where it can turn into a movement as long as white people, unfortunately, get on board.
Yeah, I don't think anyone from any particular group that has felt disenfranchised wants apologies. I think we want action. And to be clear, racism is not a black people's problem or a brown people's problem. It's everybody's problem, because it erodes the fabric of our society, and it makes us not be as strong as a nation and a country and as a world as we can be. So that everybody at every level has to interrogate their own models. I talk about people talking to their families, and you know, you don't have to be racist to engage in racism. And anti-racist work means that you have the courage, when you hear a friend or a colleague or a family member not be educated about issues, that you stand up. And that's what I talk about in terms of the work that has to happen in terms of interrogating your own family models and friendship models.
I know friends are going to ask me, you didn't ask him, what can I do? I think you just answered what we can do. What is a good first step for a Red Wing fan who's sitting out there right now watching this, and what should they do?
I think the first step is exactly what I talked about at the beginning of our conversation, and that is educate yourself. Don't expect for Black and Brown people to educate you. Do your work. There are countless materials and books to read, and podcasts to listen to. I think one of the most powerful books for white allies is a book called White Fragility. It's an uncomfortable read. It was written by a white female professor out of Washington State, out of Seattle, and it takes courage to read it. But I think it frames for white allies the difference between being a racist and anti-racist work. And so I would strongly encourage that as one of many sources of information.
Kim Davis, Senior Vice President of Social Impact, Growth Initiative, Legislative Affairs. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. I could go on forever about this. You give me one answer, and I'm filled with not only emotion, and I mean really raw emotion. I just have so many more things that I want to ask you. We would love to have you when your schedule probably slows down. To please come back on again. Obviously, Detroit is an essential part. Anybody who's from Detroit knows what our history is, and we've come a long way. We still have a long way to go. I wish you nothing but success, and I don't want to get all emotional here, but I always like to say this to people I admire, and you're certainly one of them. Keep fighting the good fight. I'm there with you. Anything I can do, I will be there for sure. Thank you very, very much, Kim.
Thanks, Art. Enjoyed the conversation.
That is the headliner, brought to you by Miller Lite, the original light beer with great taste and only 96 calories, available for delivery. A lot of work ahead for all of us, Daniela.